Ionizing radiation is like cupcakes. One cupcake, that's fine. 1,000 cupcakes at once, not fine. You've probably seen acute radiation poisoning on TV, people wrapped in bandages and such, but chances are you don't know what's going on there. So let's shed some visible light radiation on this mystery, shall we? There are a few kinds of radiation. Some is light or heat, but the kind that damages tissue is called ionizing radiation. Ionizing radiation comes in high energy waves like X-rays and gamma rays, or from nuclear material via particle decay. This kind of radiation can damage atoms, which can affect whole molecules like DNA, and that can affect your cells, organs, and eventually your whole body. For example, your cells are comprised of water, H2O, which, if broken apart by radiation, can reform as O2 or H2 or H2O2, hydrogen peroxide. Not great. Of course, this all depends on dosage. Theoretically, ionizing radiation has no safe dosage. When you get a dose of radiation, specialists use sieverts to calculate how much they used, and gray for the actual absorption of radiation into tissue. A dental or stomach X-ray might be like 8 milligrays, which isn't that many, or 8 millisieverts. Repeated low-level exposure, like in tanning or working near nuclear material, can cause cancer. But when lots of ionizing radiation hits you at once, which is what we're going to talk about, it causes acute radiation poisoning, which is serious, and it comes in 4 phases. First is prodromal. This is vomiting, nausea, diarrhea, anorexia, and more radiation makes this worse. It can hit you within a few minutes or days after an exposure. Second, you'd actually feel better. This is called the latent phase. You'd get over these flu-like symptoms, but you didn't actually get over them. If you'd had lab tests, they would show that you'd been poisoned by radiation. Then maybe weeks after that, bam, the manifest illness phase hits. That's when a bunch of bad stuff happens that we'll get into. And then 4 is recovery or death. If it's a low dosage, you can probably recover, though you may have a higher risk of cancer. However, above a certain point, the poop emoji hits the fan. Say someone was exposed to the equivalent of 125 abdomen X-rays all at once. Then they'd hit the lowest level of radiation poisoning. From 1 to 10 gray, the radiation penetrates tissue and kills bone marrow cells by damaging their DNA. No bone marrow means no replacement white blood cells in case of infection, no new red blood cells, no new platelets in case of injury. All of that is bad. It can cause death from infection or from blood loss. If your bone marrow is destroyed, you could get a bone marrow transplant, but even that only gives you a 50-50 chance. At more than 10 gray, at least 1,250 X-rays at once, cells in the gastrointestinal tract are killed, meaning the body can no longer absorb nutrients, causing electrolyte imbalances, dehydration, and worse. Once the GI tract shuts down, nothing can be done. Death is certain. Over 20 gray, 2,500 X-rays at once? It's not clear what happens, but doctors think your cardiovascular system and central nervous system swell with fluid thanks to damaged cells. In less than 3 days, the brain can't control the body anymore because of cell death, and that's all she wrote. Because radiation is damaging DNA at the atomic level, acute poisoning is very hard to treat. Radaway doesn't exist, but there are some treatments for some of the symptoms. For example, if you get an infection because your white blood cells are compromised, doctors can treat it. Same with the nausea, the burns, dehydration. We know a lot about this because of the disaster at Chernobyl and because of the bombs dropped on Japan to end World War II. Scientists entered the area studying the sick and documenting everything they could, but there's still a lot that we don't know. I mean, as scary as radiation can be, most of us will never get exposed to the dosages required to have to know all this stuff. But it's still kind of nice to know, right?